I've realized that they don't make an auto manufacturer for me. Welcome back to All Cars, y'all. I am John. This is just a hardcore editorial on my part this Saturday that it's a little sad. I feel there's not really a manufacturer out there for me. Every one of them has some kind of critical flaw, and I think I'm not the only one that probably feels this way. It does mean that I'm out of step with the rest of society, however. And what I mean by this is I'm a loyal person. When I find something that I like, I tend to stick with it. I have many of this shirt, sometimes different colors, but I have many of this shirt. And it's something personally that's bothering me that they don't make this anymore. I can't buy it. So I'm having to find another shirt that I like as much. And we're talking about not just the material and how it feels and how deep is this V, but the pattern on it as well. I've got some Land's End shirts I kind of like, but they don't have a pattern on them. I like to stick with things I know. And that's kind of how the auto industry in America was built. I believe it was Durant that was building GM, right? A car for every purpose and purse. That you would start and you'd start in a small Chevy and you'd work your way up. And as your career was more successful and as you got older and as you aged, you'd work your way up through Oakland and Oldsmobile and Buick. And then when you've arrived, you would have a Cadillac. And that appeals to me, that sense of loyalty to something, but that's a two-way street, isn't it? That is, I'm giving you my loyalty in the form of my money, but you're giving me back a quality, reliable automobile that can fit any of my needs at any moment in my life. Now, since I would say about the 80s is really when it took hold, that's not what society does anymore. Many people don't look at brands or at companies. They look at their specific need. If they're looking for a compact sport utility vehicle, they might get this Honda or this Mazda. But then when they're looking for a more mid-sized sport utility, two-row, they might look over here at a Toyota. And then they might look at, they want a minivan. Oh, well, the Kia Carnival looks really nice. People hop around without a lot of brand loyalty. And that bothers me. And it puts me out of step. The problem is no brand offers everything I want. And each one of them has that flaw. So what do I want? And I think you would feel this, many of you would feel the same way. And I encourage you, if you do, let me know in the comments below. I would like an American manufacturer. I would like it built in America. I would like it to offer a full lineup of reliable cars. Okay, so let's look at a few manufacturers here and think about it. Well, big manufacturer in the world would be Volkswagen. They offer a relatively full lineup, not extensively, but what if you want a compact truck or a large truck in America? Can't have it. And some of them are built here in America, but not many, and they're not an American company. Well, think about Nissan. They build quite a few cars here in America, and they certainly offer the Frontier as a mid-sized truck. And I personally have had good results with their reliability, and I very much, as I've been open on this channel saying, I very much like their ergonomics and how they sit. There's a lot to like here, from the Sentra to the Altima to the new Murano. But they've eliminated their full-size truck. They don't have a minivan. Not that I want a minivan in the near future, but there's that question of reliability in there, whether it was the CVT before or whether it's the new VCT, variable compression engine, right? What about Honda? Well, Honda is one of my favorite brands. I have one. We've had multiple in the past, both my wife and I. I'm very loyal to them. I don't particularly like the Civic. I think it's more form over function than anything else. I think it's strayed amazingly from its 80s and 90s heritage. But again, if you want a mid-size truck, they do have the Ridgeline. They have a good selection of SUVs, but there's no full-size truck. Not that I need, if the full-size truck, I want to back up here. The full-size truck is not the end-all be-all. That's not necessarily what I'm looking for, but I'd like it to be the option. If I'm talking about loyalty to a manufacturer, that needs to be an option, not just for me, but for many, many hundreds of thousands of Americans every year. But at least Honda, Nissan, and Toyota still have cars to their credit. The next would be Toyota. They build cars here, but they're not an American company, another Japanese company, but they are a full line. And they're famous for their reliability. They've been having slip-ups, certainly recalls and questionable decisions on some of their things. But if you want a reliable but not terribly nice mid-sized truck, the Tacoma is hard to beat. Then they still have the Tundra. And they have a lineup of cars and SUVs, which sometimes I question their styling and sometimes I don't like their interiors. And I don't like the choices they make, but they're good buys. But I'm not comfortable in Toyotas many times. Certainly the last one I drove was a RAV4, and it's a great seller. It's widely respected. It wasn't uncomfortable. I just thought it was kind of ick. I'd rather have the CR-V, for example. And stress, it's not an American company. Well, that brings us back to Stellantis. Well, I hate to say it, and I've been slow to accept it up here and here. Chrysler's dead. Stellantis is not an American company. This is a holding corporation of a bunch of stuff. And sure, they've got a headquarters here in America, and they build with union labor in America and in Canada. But they're not an American company anymore, and they don't offer a full line. I mean, sure, if I want a full-size truck, they've got Ram, but they don't have midsize. They don't have compact. I don't really want a sports car, but at least they offer them. They have a minivan. And there's some sport utilities out there, certainly in the Jeep realm, but like Dodge has been starved for products. Chrysler's dead, and there's nothing there for me to be loyal to anymore. And certainly we could talk about Mazda, not a full lineup. We could talk about Kia and Hyundai, not American, really good lineup, getting better in the trucks, but still there's a reliability question for them. That leaves me with Ford and General Motors. I was going to say Chevy. General Motors is the one that I would think of normally. I've told people on my channel before, I haven't mentioned it for a few years, but when I was younger, we were a GM family. My grandfather on one side bought Cadillacs, my grandfather on the other side bought Pontiacs, and my family, my mom and my dad, bought Oldsmobiles and Buicks until 1986, when they finally gave up on GM and moved to Ford. And then GM, they are American and they are union built. That's not a huge draw for me. I think that things built in the South at non-union factories, I think the workers are actually treated better and paid more fairly for the area they live in. But they don't offer cars. Lots and lots of sport utilities, but they don't offer cars. And my problem with GM is really simple. Millions or tens of millions of us have been betrayed by GM in one way or the other over the decades. Promises not kept. Whether it's testing engines to make sure they're reliable, like the North Star, coming out with a new, thoroughly competitive engine like the Quad 4, but it had some oil leakage problems and was very, very rough, being behind the times. And when they did catch up, interiors tended to be cheap. And the whole thing often was just not assembled very well. And there's still that question about GM, at least in my mind. Are they built as well as some of the other manufacturers out there? I've said before, I'm willing to take a chance on GM again. I've been gone from them for 25 years now or more. I'd be willing to take a chance again. And that leaves me with Ford. Once again, American, built sometimes in America, no cars. So there's no manufacturer that offers everything I want. So you have to start deciding where you want to give in. And I don't want to do that. I want a manufacturer that when I'm ready to say, let's get rid of this car, I want the next thing, I want to go to that manufacturer. I want to believe in that manufacturer. Ford, in my opinion, has had a history since the 70s of doing this. Excellent products, cheap interiors. Excellent product, unreliable. Excellent product, massive recalls, the most recalls in history in the first 6 months of the year. That's where we are right now. And then all these manufacturers build things overseas. I'm not sold exclusively. I'm not going to draw a line in the sand and say, I'm never going to buy something that's not made in America. It's unfeasible in today's world. But given the choice between something built in America, and second place would be Canada and Mexico, I'll go with those versus Korea or China. Japan I don't have a big problem with, but I'd like to keep it at least here. I'd prefer it to be American built. So there's no manufacturer that meets every single requirement out there. The closest is Toyota, but then I have to give up on my money benefiting an American corporation. The next choice would be Ford or GM, but then I have to accept that they don't offer everything. They don't offer what I want. And, well, my car might be built in China. My SUV might be built in China. If Buick still had cars, or if Chevy still had cars, if they still had things like the LeSabre and the Regal, this would be an easy answer for me. It really would be. But they don't. And this makes me sad. That is the state of American manufacturing right now, that NAFTA has led to globalization. America's wealth has lifted up many, many parts of the rest of the world, and the benefit to us has been cheaper products. But we've hollowed out our manufacturing. And for at least a subset of auto buyers who are not just grazing for whatever the next thing happens to be and are indifferent to where it's built, what company, what nation benefits. If you're like me and you're looking for a company to be loyal to, I have to say right now, Ford is the closest because they build so much in America compared to anybody else. In spite of their challenges in, well, building something that doesn't fall apart or doesn't have a recall and not having cars, Ford is the one that I think is doing the best job in this global marketplace to do right by Americans. I think GM's there, but they're a little more globally diversified than Ford. I don't have a conclusion here. I like to end my videos with a, so what does this mean? And a overarching conclusion that I pull something together with an opinion of, here's what it means for the industry, or here's what it means for you. And I don't have one for this. This is a personal editorial that the whole situation just makes me sad. Growing up, when we wanted a car, we moved from one Oldsmobile to the next Oldsmobile to a Buick. And years of decreasing quality and increasing problems led my family to Ford. And eventually to Hondas. So who do you stick with if you want to be loyal to a company that can be there at every step of your way? I'd like to say this is not, I'll close with this, this is not exclusively for automobiles. This also applies to many other things, like the shirt I started with. When I find a shirt, I want to buy that brand of shirt. When I find shorts, I want to buy that brand of shorts, shoes, socks, kitchen appliances. We've picked a brand and we're kind of migrating that way as we need. It's not just autos. I want to be loyal to a brand that's loyal to me. But I do believe that reciprocity is gone in today's world. And I miss it. And I think a company that plays up on that, much like Chrysler in the early 80s when it was buy American because we're American. If you can find a better car, buy it. I think there's a place for that in the world today. Let me know what you think below. And if you like this video, there's a button for that below. Thanks very much for being here, y'all.